How you doing, by the way?
I'm okay. I'm just bored. I'm just tired.
You're tired of being bored and tired?
Yeah, it's the situation is really starting to drag me down. Now, part of my problem is that the wife spends an awful lot of time watching American news channels like MSNBC and seeing the dumpster fire that's happening down there with the virus and the protests and the stupid president and all the rest of it is really, I said to her at dinner, maybe we would be much better off mentally if we just stopped watching the news.
Have you heard this term, doom scrolling?
Yes.
The idea that you're sitting in bed and the last thing you do before you go to sleep and close your eyes is scroll through Twitter. Like, what a horrible way to end your day.
It is a terrible way to do it. And I have a program on my iPad called Flipboard. And there is a magazine that somebody curates called Fucking Trump.
Great.
And all it is all the stories about Trump from the last 36 hours. And I scroll through that looking for all kinds of confirmation bias. I know. But it helps me feel a little bit superior here in the attic of North America.
For every person who has died of COVID-19 elsewhere in the world, 47 Americans have died.
Yeah. Tell me again about American exceptionalism. I was telling you some...
Oh, you've heard that phrase, right? America, it's a third world country wearing a Gucci belt.
Something along those lines. I was talking to some people. We had some people over in our bubble on Saturday night. And we all agreed that it might be a good idea for us to gather at the Peace Bridge and just scream across the Niagara River, "Get it together, America. What's wrong with you?"
Give your head a shake.
Yeah, and there's a couple of podcasts that I listen to, and they're hate listens. So these are people who believe that the coronavirus is not so much a hoax, but it's overblown, and that the whole thing is being perpetuated by the media to bring down Donald Trump.
Oh, so Kellyanne Conway's podcast.
Well, Kellyanne Conway would make a very good guest on this particular podcast.
Yeah.
And I listen because you got to know what the other side is thinking, right?
No, not anymore. No, we already know what the other side is thinking. Why are you suffering? Why are you putting yourself through this pain?
Because it's necessary to know what the enemy is thinking. It's necessary to know what the stupid people are thinking, because how am I supposed to know when to call in the asteroid to wipe out planet Earth if I don't understand exactly what level of idiocracy we're at?
All right, stand by. Here we go.
From the headquarters of Geeks and Beats magazine, now with 1.2 billion subscribers on iTunes and GeoCities, this is the world's most popular podcast with Alan Cross and Michael Hainsworth, featuring musical guest Sting.
How has the entertainment industry evolved since the death of Kurt Cobain?
Meet the bad boy of mental health awareness.
Yep, TSN's Michael Landsberg joins us as we reflect on what would have been Robin Williams' 69th birthday.
See, I gave you the one with the S, then the apostrophe.
Yes, thank you.
I have to pronounce it.
Thank you.
And now, Alan Cross and Michael Hainsworth.
At geeksandbeats.com, our A-segment producer, Shane Alexander, put together this remarkable piece looking back at Robin Williams, because this week he would have turned 69. And we know that his passing got us talking about some very complicated questions associated with mental health. Someone who has been spending a lot of time in the public eye on that exact topic is none other than Michael Landsberg. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do what it is I've decided to do, and that is don't shut up about it. So when you give me a platform, I say thank you.
What, though, of the pushback I can imagine you would get from certain quarters? Because I think about addressing issues of mental health by looking at it from a generational perspective. Like my grandfather would never have gone to see a head shrink, as he would have called it at that time. My father would have been less likely, but more likely to take medication for whatever mental health related issues he may have had. I am of a generation now that is starting to come to understand and accept this. And then my kid, you talk about millennials and Gen Z, they're more than happy to tell you exactly what their therapist thought of what they shared with them at any given moment. Tell me about that arc of acceptance, understanding, and approval.
Well, I think it's called progress. And I think it's been an incredibly slow evolution that has been sped up recently. Like everything that happens in this time where you have social media and you have computers that magnify our intelligence, right? So messages that we want to put out reach people in a way that you never could have before in your dad's generation, in your grandfather's generation, for sure. So I think we've taken greater leaps in the last decade than we did before that. But here, it's pretty simple, that we all started with this idea that mental illness was different than physical illness. Just the fact that we call it mental illness, I think, is a loser right away. It's a losing way to refer to it, because what does it actually mean? Like, no one's ever been able to explain to me why depression, for instance, is a mental illness and Parkinson's is a brain disease. So right away, you're distinguishing between something like Parkinson's or any other physiological change that you can see in somebody's brain and mental illness. And for that reason, we don't accept it like we accept something like Parkinson's. Like, no one says to someone whose hands are shaking, come on, God, stop the shaking with your hands. Come on, you got to be able to do better than that. Come on, suck it up. So I think that right from the get-go, we have lived in an environment which has seen mental illness different as physical illness, when guys like me have spent the last decade trying to convince people that mental illness is a physical illness of the brain like anything else.
That's what I tell people who question depression. Is you have we're basically a big bag of water and chemicals. And sometimes those chemicals get out of balance for whatever reason. They may manifest itself in, a cancer, or they may manifest itself in some kind of, degenerative muscle disease. Depression is much the same way. You have to understand that whatever wiring is going on between your ears is a bit off. And there are many ways to try and correct it, but it is something that the worst thing that you can do to anybody who is feeling depressed is go up to them and say, "Oh, what have you got to worry about? Cheer up." You just want to punch them in the face.
Yeah. It's funny you mention that, because one of my first experiences, well, actually pretty much my first experience with the Bell Let's Talk program was as a cable news anchor. And now, Michael, I'm sure you've experienced this in your sports life as well, where you've got a day job, you're working on a show, and suddenly out of nowhere, an opportunity to interview someone drops in your lap. And I had an opportunity to interview the spokesperson for the Bell Let's Talk when they launched it. And this was literally dropped into my lap in the commercial break before the interview with absolutely no preparation whatsoever.
Oh, that's no problem at all. Well, I'm being sarcastic.
No, you are being sarcastic, but to a degree, you can actually pull off an interview that's dropped in your lap at the last minute if you have a body of knowledge about that particular topic. And I did not. And one of my little tricks when I was dropped into a situation where I didn't understand it was to let the other person do all of the talking and just sort of draw it all out of them. And just every time they finished an answer, just ask another question related to the last answer. But you have to start with question number one. And because I knew absolutely nothing about this topic, my first point, and you are going to be horrified, was, so I suppose right out of the gate, it's just important to get up out of bed every day. And you should have seen the reaction on her face.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I think I've actually been a spokesperson for Bell Let's Talk Days from that first year. And I would imagine you're talking about Mary Deacon.
Yeah.
Was it Mary?
I believe it was Mary, yeah.
Right. So if you and I had that same conversation like we're having now, but it was just the two of us, and you started by saying, I guess it's really important to get out of bed in the morning. I would see that as the perfect introduction, because if you appear to be ignorant about the topic, not ignorant, but ignorant about the topic.
In the proper definition of the term, I absolutely was. Right.
But that is you're the perfect person then to talk to me, to an audience that is ignorant about the topic. So in a lot of ways, even if you did that on purpose, I would say it was brilliant. And the fact is you didn't do it on purpose. I would say it was really useful. Say something to me now that would be stigma tainted, so to speak, and I'll show you how effective it can be.
Well, we don't need to get into that as much as the...
Whoa. I'm trying to control this. I'm trying to dominate this interview, and now you're going back and stopping me? I don't think so, Michael.
No. What I mean by that is, because I know what you're trying to accomplish, and we're sort of establishing that point, which is every point of ignorance is an opportunity to educate.
Yes. You know, one of the things that I like the most on Twitter, and I'm on Twitter a lot and talking almost exclusively about mental health. And, you know, there was probably a time when I did 1,000 straight days where I would just be making a comment about my own battle. I woke up, I didn't feel good. This is, you know, I'll do things like, this is my brain talking to me today. And in 240 characters, I would try to explain something that would make a difference in somebody else's life. So I have done this an awful lot, and I can tell you that the best thing for me is when someone shows ignorance, when someone tweets back, hey, you know what, maybe you should look at the great things in your life. I don't get offended by that, because that's why we're doing what we're doing. We're doing that because people don't understand. So somebody showing a lack of understanding is the best thing that you can have, because debate is what leads to opinion change. People hear you, people hear me if we were arguing about something, and they would be able to hear both of them and then come to the conclusion, wait a second here. I think one of those Michaels is right for sure. So I think that as weird as this sounds, ignorance can be a really good thing for an interviewer.
I think it can be a really good tool, simply because what you can do is take the attitude that you're being presented, turn it around and explain it. Like, for example, you said that a lot of people don't understand depression in people who seem to have it all, who have family life, money, a good job and all the rest of it.
Robin Williams, perfect example.
Exactly. There is something there that, again, you're a bag of chemicals and something has gone wrong. And it's very, very hard just to turn it around on your own, if you can at all.
Well, you know, you're referring to those, the bag of chemicals, which I think is a good way to refer to it. And sometimes, as you say, the chemicals are off and you develop cancer or diabetes or, you know, something that you can quantify, right? You can do a blood test and see blood sugar. Cancer, you can do a biopsy, or you could do an X-ray or any other kind of scan. But where it's really complicated is with mental health, because there's no way to show it. There's no way to say this is it. And that's a huge stumbling block towards people understanding and treating it the same way. And then there's something else which is totally different. But there's the fact that people do not see mental illness as something that, well, let me change that. They believe they've gone through it. You've heard people say 1,000,000 times over, well, we all go through something sometime, or, hey, we all have it sometime, talking about depression. It was like, no, we don't all have depression sometime. Depression is an illness. We all have sadness in our lives. We all have times in our life where we're just sad. I use the analogy all the time that my mom died 1.5 years ago. That makes me sad, but it doesn't make me depressed. Sadness is a natural step in all of our lives. You can't live on this planet and not feel sadness sometimes, but that's not the same as the mental illness called depression.
Sadness is an emotion. Depression is a clinical problem.
Yeah. Sadness can be a symptom of depression. Some people who are depressed, clinically depressed, have sadness in their life. And some people who are sad are clinically depressed. But one doesn't mean the other. There's no direct relationship between the two. Like I would say for me, and I've had severe depression, that sadness was never a factor for me. It was this, and I think the chemical explanation is the best way. I kind of look at it like, how do I describe this illness that has been so painful for me and so many other people? And for me, it's the loss of the ability to experience joy.
Yes.
So it's like I'm in my car and my car sputters and stops and I'm out of gas. Well, it doesn't matter how many times I try to start the car. The car's not going to start unless I put gas in it. Similarly, when I'm depressed, it doesn't matter how many great things I try to do to make myself feel better. I can't do it because ultimately I have lost whatever chemical gas is in my brain, so to speak, that will allow me to feel that.
I have terrible seasonal affective disorder. And when we get to the first day of winter, Christmas is happening. There's gifts, there's family, there's some travel, and I am just absolutely, utterly miserable. And I've got medication for this now. But it was, even with the meds, it is really hard. And people look at you and go, it's Christmas, smile, let's have a good time. You can't. You physically, it's really hard to explain to somebody who's never gone through it. You don't have the capacity to experience anything other than this gray shadow that descends across to your field of vision, and that's all you know.
And I think that's largely why we were particularly shocked by the death of Robin Williams. He was a guy who not only had it all, but he seemed very happy in the world he had. And Alan, you've reported for years on the deaths of celebrities in music tied to suicide explicitly, and Michael, in the sports world as well, these are issues too. How is the entertainment industry addressing this?
I think like everyone, like every industry, they're kind of wandering in the dark, feeling their way through it. There's no history here. There's no textbook on how, as a society, we should deal with mental health. I could tell you what I've learned from it, and what I've learned from it, whether it's the entertainment business or the sports business, or whether it's Bay Street in Toronto, or whether it's anything else. The issues that we're talking about today, whether it's Robin Williams, who you're talking about, or somebody, or Chris Cornell, or Chester Bennington, whether it's any of those people, the idea that money or success can insulate you from depression is something that we need to get over. Because not just because that's damaging, but we need to understand that one has nothing to do with the other. Because if you make the assumption that, hey, celebrating your Grammy Awards, for instance, and the great things that you've had is going to lessen your depression, then you just don't understand depression. We need to understand it better. We need people to share the experience of being depressed. And most of all, we need to say to people who've never been through it before, Michael, have you experienced depression?
I would say yes.
Okay. So thanks, man. You ruined my whole bit here. But let's, if I was talking to someone else, I would say, okay, well, you've never been through it, so you can't understand it. Say those words to me. I don't understand. Because you think you do. I call it healthy brainitis. It's like this affliction that goes with the healthy brain that makes the assumption that they do understand, that they've been through it, but they've been strong enough to get over it. Like, people actually believe that, oh, we all go through it sometime, or, hey, I was sad, back in the day, but I fought through it. I'm strong, and Landsberg must be weak because I got through it, and Landsberg had to go to see a psychiatrist and had to go on medication and all of those things. So the healthy brain can't understand the sick brain, nor should it, right? Like, no guy would you get punched in the face if you said to a woman, hey, I understand what it's like to be pregnant and give birth. Of course, that would be ludicrous. But similarly, you can't understand something like depression if you haven't been through it.
By the way, as we record this, today would have been Chris Cornell's 56th birthday. And I think it was on this day 3 years ago that Chester Bennington killed himself.
Well, you brought up a very interesting point. And let's go back as far as Kurt Cobain. That was, I think, perhaps one of the most high-profile examples of a mental health issue leading to suicide that I had ever experienced in my life at that point. And I would have had the assumption that the recording industry would have used it as a wake-up call and would have recognized the importance of addressing mental health issues. Did we just go, oh, such a shame that Kurt died, I guess we'll just put it on a T-shirt?
Well, no, not really. I was really dismissive of Kurt when he died. Oh, weak, didn't go through with rehab. He was just a mess. He was a drug addict. He deserved what he got. That was my thinking at the time. I've evolved beyond that. He was.
Why? Why did you evolve? What was it that led you to go, you know what, I got to revisit this?
Personal experience, meeting other people who have gone through similar situations, you develop an empathy for why would somebody that famous, that successful, that revered, with that many fans, decide to kill himself? Well, you don't know what's going on behind somebody's eyes. And I have seen far too many people, I've worked with far too many people who have died or lost their way because they suffered from some kind of depression, did not seek treatment for, was worried about the stigma attached to it, and tried to work their way through it and did not. And so I've completely turned 360 degrees or 180 degrees on this matter. Now there are organizations within the music industry that do try to help with musicians who have fallen on hard times. Unison is one, for example. Music Cares in the United States is another one. It's just that there's more to be done. The idea in the music industry is keep the talent happy, keep them producing, keep them making money. Whatever it takes, we'll do it. And if they happen to die along the way, that's rock and roll.
You know, what you said when you're talking about addiction and how you looked at Kurt Cobain and how, you know, he didn't follow through with Alcoholics Anonymous, how he just kept feeding his addiction. And you looked at that at the time like that was a weakness on his part, like he just had no self-control. I mean, through it all of his talent and his brilliant performances and his ability to write and how good looking he was still a loser. And that's how we all looked at I mean, that's not you in particular. That's how the world has looked at addiction until recently when somebody whispered it. Oh my God, I think addiction is actually an illness. And now we have come so far when it comes to addiction and how we view it. I'm writing a foreword to a book that was done by a hockey player named Brent Myers. Brent Myers was a fighter in the NHL. Brent Myers was addicted to cocaine and alcohol, and he's the only one to ever be suspended permanently from the National Hockey League because of recreational drugs. So I'm writing the foreword to his book because he's a friend of mine and because obviously it's an important topic to me. And I'm reading through it and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if I had read this book 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have looked at it so differently. I'm looking at him as the victim through all of this, as opposed to 20 years ago, I would have seen him as the criminal, right? I would have been going, oh, dude, what are you doing, man? You know what it's doing to you, yet you continue to ignore the help that's out there. You know, because he kept saying, I understand that this is killing me. But then he would talk about his craving for it. And then I started to think back to my own brother, who when I was 14, he was 18, he started to drink. And he ended up getting into medical school when he was, I think, 19. He was a doctor when he was 24. He was driven by alcohol and prescription medication for 20 years. I mean, driven by it, like he could not survive a day without it. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, you know, like why doesn't he just stop? You know, and it was tough because my parents would get upset about it, obviously. And ultimately, one day he said, you know, I don't want to die, so I'm going to have to do something about it. He went and got clean, but he couldn't get over it until he walked into a psychiatrist's office who said to him, you know, like, has anyone ever, you know, diagnosed you with panic disorder? And he said, no one's ever mentioned it. He said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to treat you for this illness. I'm going to put you on medication to start with and come back in a month. My brother never took another drink, never took another pill, won't take a painkiller when he's had surgeries because he understands how susceptible he is to the high. And he said this to me once. He said, you know, you don't understand what it feels like for me. He said, some people like me don't like the feeling of loss of control. Then there's people that like it, but they can control it. Then there's people like me, referring to himself, I crave it. It becomes the best thing ever for me, yet it's the worst thing for me. So it's like we would never have come to the conclusions we've came to over the last 20 years if not for, I think, somebody deciding once upon a time, this is an illness.
You mentioned something very relevant to this conversation about perception, particularly the idea that if you sought help, you were weak. If you were writing the foreword to a book written by a hockey player, I can't imagine a sport more macho and less likely to be interested in addressing mental health issues. This seems really quite a remarkable thing to write this book in the first place.
It is for sure. And I think that's a reflection of his individual strength. I think it's a reflection of his time in his life because, he's long finished playing. And I think it's a reflection to some extent of a change in attitude. So I'm waiting for the person to come out and write the book when they're still playing. Now that would be an example of courage. Now, we are in a better place than we were 10 years ago or 20 years ago, without a doubt. But the perception of mental illness being a weakness is right at the core of the stigma. It's like weakness. That one word explains everything because no one wants to be perceived as weak, right? Doesn't matter whether you're a hockey player or a broadcaster or whether you're a lawyer. Weakness is a bad thing, is a negative. So the challenge is not to convince people to expose their weakness. The challenge is to convince them that not only is sharing your mental illness not a weakness, but it's actually a strength. I mean, you look at Brent Myers, the guy who wrote that book. Everyone's going to read this book and say, oh my God, that guy is so strong to stand up. Yet people don't give their own themselves a break. They look at their own illness as being a reflection of weakness, but then they hear somebody else. Like I give speeches all over and I say, hey, you may think that you're weak because you have this illness, but who sounds like the strongest guy in the room right now? And the answer is me, because I'm on stage talking about my own struggle. So why won't you give yourself the same break?
Michael, thank you so much for your time and your insight into this very important topic, particularly at a time when we're starting to talk more about it on anniversaries like the birth of Robin Williams, and that we can't celebrate his 69th birthday today.
No, and I don't know if ironic is the right word, but Chris and Chester, sounds like I was buddies with those guys. Their deaths affected me in a pretty profound way, because sometimes you hear about somebody who takes their own life, who experienced the same illness that you have. And then you go, oh my gosh, the stakes are really high. And that makes me look at my own treatment at this point, and the fact that I am on medication and have been for a long time. And the fact that I regret a lot of days being on medication because of the side effects. But then, I think about Chris Cornell and I think, wow, thank God that I had some place to turn. I had an option that would allow me to live a pretty normal life. So I think that those tragedies can teach us an awful lot. And thank you for chatting with me.
Ever wanted to be a big shot co-producer? It's just like Hollywood. Visit geeksandbeats.com to learn how you can pad your resume with an exciting show credit. We'll even send you the album cover of your episode, suitable for framing in your parents' basement.
Oh my goodness, I've just pulled up the Patreon account.
And?
Oh, we're rolling in dough, my friend.
Okay, put a number to that.
We got a pledge of $50 an episode from Jacob Young.
Good God, Jacob, what's wrong with you? Do you have a credit card or something?
He is a double co-producer, because if you donate $25 for a single episode, you become a co-producer. Yes. Now he's donated $50, and his lifetime support is $0, which doesn't mean no dollars. It means we're going to keep digging his credit card until he turns it off.
I think we better alert the authorities here. This is a mistake.
Scott Weston, thank you for your $2 per episode pledge. He's been a patron for about 8 days or so. And we got a whole bunch of support as well. Michael Hollick had edited his episode donation from $1 per to $20 per. And it was just, just here and there, once a month kind of thing. He just wanted to support us here. So we put a lifetime limit of $64, which means we'll only hit him up 3 times.
Wow. Are we having an effect on people?
Positive or negative, or just generally?
Are they paying us to go away?
I mean, well, if they're paying us to go away, that's just as good as paying us to stay, don't you think?
Oh, it is, because we're not going to go away. We're just going to keep taking your money.
Exactly. So if you'd like to support the show, we greatly appreciate it. Geeksandbeats.com. And click the support the show link at the top there. And we're continuing to do these as video episodes. How are you feeling about this?
I'm okay. Did you hear the dog? The dog's here in the studio with me.
Yeah, but at least this time now, when the listeners hear the dog snoring underneath the console, people will be able to see that it's not me snoring while you talk.
No, and I can't move the camera to show you the dog. She's on the floor here with me right now, but I think she's agitating to go out for a walk.
No, well, then we better let you go, because
You know what we should do the next time we do a live thing is that we should go through our house, and I can certainly help with this, and pick out all the electronic items that we're not using and have a silent auction.
I'm using every electronic
Everything?
toy I've got in my house. Are you kidding me?
I've got stuff here in the studio here that I don't use anymore.
8-track cassette tapes.
Catch all new episodes of Geeks and Beats Wednesdays on iTunes and watch for Geeks and Beats magazine on a newsstand near you. To be part of next week's show, call area code 323-319-NERD. Follow the stories on Twitter, Facebook, and get your dose of Geeks and Beats anytime at geeksandbeats.com. The Geeks and Beats podcast would like to thank the National Science Foundation.